Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I'm Jude Sandval, and this is Strategic Defense, the operational briefing for fathers who refuse to be sidelined by a system that exploits drift and unpreparedness. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. While a lawyer handles your legal rights, I serve as your guide through the decision gap to protect your actual role as a father. You are now entering the command center. Today's briefing begins now. Hello, dads, and welcome back to this week's show in our briefing. If you are listening, and you are, to this today, you've likely realized that the truth is not the same as evidence. You know, this is something I see every single week with lots of the dads I coach, good dads, great dads who connect with me with their stories of 1,000 injustices. But when we stop and take the time to look at their legal case, all they have are feelings and accusations. They tell me, Jude, she's being impossible, she's keeping me from the kids, she's alienating them, she's poisoning their minds, etc. And I look at them and I ask, well, great, not great, but okay, but can you prove it? And most of the time the answer is no. They have a collection of angry memories, but they don't have a narrative that a judge can actually rule on, or that a third party can look at and make a recommendation around. So what we're going to do today is we're going to fix that for you. We're going to talk about the single most powerful weapon in your arsenal when you're dealing with a high conflict opponent, and that is pattern recognition. We're going to move you from he said, she said, venting into the world of strategic intelligence gathering. I want you, this is my goal for our time together today. I want you to leave understanding how to turn her bad behavior into a forensic exhibit that your attorney or a third party can look at and you can use to protect your bond with your kids. But before we dive into the chart, I want to remind you about the landscape that you're dealing with here. You've heard me talk about it, and I just got to remind you every week, the 51% rule. Family court works on a preponderance of evidence. The idea that something is more likely than not to be true. If you walk into this whole situation, this whole divorce, just saying she's interfering, that is simply an accusation. But if you walk in with a 90-day timeline showing 15 documented instances of interference, each anchored by a timestamped message, that is no longer an accusation, it's a fact. And facts are the only thing that will save your fatherhood in a system that is fundamentally biased towards the status quo. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack the narrative building protocol. It's something that I've put together to help the dads and assist them through this process. It's not a diary. It's not a place for your feelings or your thoughts or consciousness of thought or anything. It's a clinical forensic map of the opposition's conduct. So let's jump in. There's a mindset here that you've got to be aware of. And that mindset is forensic versus emotional. The first thing that you have to master is the mindset. It's one of the things that we work in coaching. It's one of the 5 steps that I work with guys directly. You have to stop documenting like a husband and start documenting like a tactical officer, if you will. When you're in the middle of a high conflict divorce, your emotions are a liability. Your anger is a handle she can grab to pull you off course. When you sit down at night to update your log, If you write Betty was being mean, Betty was acting crazy, etc., you've already failed. Why? Because mean and crazy are subjective. They are judgments. A judge or a third party that's going to be making assessment reads that and thinks you're just another bitter ex-husband, or you guys can't get along, or whatever else. You've lost your credibility before they've read that first sentence. You have to apply what I call the third party test. I want you to write every single entry as if the judge or that third party, a guardian ad litem or a parental evaluator or whatever, is reading it over your shoulder in real time. Always when I'm working with dads, I say you're planning for the worst. So you need to think about the end goal or what is going to be the end result, which is oftentimes that you are going to be in court and you are going to be on the stand, you are going to be cross-examined. So you need to be thinking like this and apply this third-party test all of the time. Is this going to be presented in court? If it is presented in court, what is it going to sound like? If it sounds like you're complaining, you delete it. If it sounds like a factual report from a neutral observer, you keep it. So how do you do that? We use 4 pillars for every entry. Who, what, where, and when. 4 W's. It's really easy. Who, what, where, and when. Instead of saying something like she was being mean, you write on March 8th, Betty arrived at the exchange location at 7:10 p.m., which was 40 minutes past the court-ordered time. I messaged her at 6:34 and 6:38 to confirm her arrival, but she refused to respond. See the difference? That entry has no opinion whatsoever. It's a record of a behavioral violation. It is a behavioral violation, and it's a record of that, right? It's clinical, it's neutral, and most of all, it is something that can legitimately be used to make your case by your legal team. Big difference. So let's talk about what you're going to map on this chart and what that's going to do for you. And I've broken it down to 6 different categories. This is just a limited number of categories. And when I'm coaching guys, I'm like, these are the 6 you want to pay attention to, but there are some of them won't apply, but there may be more that you want to put in there also. But you have to make sure in this chart, you are documenting the narrative that you want to build, right? So to build a narrative that works, you have to categorize the behavior, and it needs to be succinct so that you can look at the patterns. Anybody can look at the patterns and see, oh yeah, this is what's happening. Because if you don't have it in this chart, your attorney needs to be able to identify specific legal violations in a matter of seconds. And we use these 6 specific categories to organize the case. Otherwise, it just becomes just think about it in this context. Your attorney has maybe on the low end 20 to 30 clients, on the high end 50 or 60. Think about the court docket, and the judge has so many people coming through. A third party evaluator's got probably dozens of people that they're working with. All of this stuff mixes all together. You need to be able to give them something clear and concise that is broken down very specifically that can show what's happening. So that's why we do that. That's why we do this. And that's why it's critical for you to be able to document this stuff and then be able to hand it over so that they can really, really look. Everybody from your attorney to the judge. So let's talk about what these 6 categories are. The first category that I recommend is exclusion. And that's when you are systematically erased from the decision-making loop. Say if she's holding parent-teacher conferences for your kiddos without informing you, that's exclusion. If she takes the kids to new pediatrician and doesn't put your name on the emergency contact list, that's exclusion. If they're doing an extracurricular activity and you're not given the schedule, or you're not put on the contact list, or not even having the organization hasn't even been told that you exist, that is an exclusion. You need to document every time you are treated like an optional parent. And over time, this builds a case that she's incapable of co-parenting and is violating your right to joint legal custody. The second category is the one that I feel just causes the most damage to your kiddos, and that is gatekeeping. This is any attempt to limit your physical access to the children. So the exclusion is different than the gatekeeping. The exclusion is basically she's just like kind of keeping you out of the loop of stuff. Gatekeeping is an active attempt to limit your physical access to your children. And I see it all the time with the plans trap, right? She'll say, "Oh, you can't have them this weekend. We have plans." Even if it's your court-ordered time, you need to document that. You need to document what I call the YMCA examples, like when she physically removes a child the moment you arrive to one of their events. So it could be an extracurricular activity, a baseball practice, or a rehearsal or a recital or something like that, where she's just not giving them the opportunity, or gatekeeping that they got to sit next to her or be by her, or she's just, sometimes guys have talked about physically standing in between a child and them so that they can't have a just simple conversation while you're there. I know it sounds crazy, and some of you who might not be in high conflict think some of these examples that I give are just crazy. These aren't even my examples. I've got my own crazy examples. These are examples that come from other guys in our community. And if you don't believe me, just jump on our call. We've got the calls on the second and the fourth Saturday of every month. Jump on one of the calls, and they're free. Jump on one of the calls and listen to some of the stories. We will go into intimate detail with guys on what they've got going on and strategize and try to help guys out. So get on those calls. But this particular example I'm giving here is not one of my examples. It's from one of the dads in our community. But anyway, gatekeeping is the high velocity weapon used to create a new restricted status quo, right? So if you don't document it, the court assumes, and this is the key part, guys, is if you don't document it, so it's one thing fighting against it, which you should be doing and continue to show up for stuff. But if you don't document it, the court assumes you were flexible and agreed to see the kids less. So she's gatekeeping, and you're just trying to be nice. And I get this all the time too. I don't want to make it more difficult for the kids. It's very high conflict. That is part of her goal in eventually then creating this status quo of that. And I actually just read one today from a request for orders. Well, he hasn't been around that much and he's spending time away. Well, yeah, he's doing it because she's creating such a high conflict situation, and the risk is so high for the dads with some sort of false allegation. But then they use that to try to demonstrate or try to create the narrative that, well, he's choosing to be away. He doesn't want to see the kids. He's not actively involved. So you've got to document this, because then you have the documentation that says, well, this is the actual situation, right? So the third category is interference. This is basically psychological warfare. It's the late night video calls or phone calls that disrupt your bedtime routine with the kiddos. It's the mommy's room comments intended to make the children feel like your house isn't their home. It's any action basically that disrupts the bond you're building during your time. It's very, very subtle, but it is lethal to your long-term influence, particularly if the kiddos are younger, because what's happening is they're creating a loyalty conflict. So they're saying stuff like, "Yep, this is mommy's room," or they're trying to call and say and talk at times that would not be appropriate or are disrupting your time with them in the guise of like, "Oh, I just want to talk to the kids," or whatever else that she might be saying. So pay attention to it. Again, it's like a psychological warfare. So then the fourth category is control. This is the micromanagement of your life. Now, some of this, fellas, just might come from the relational dynamic that you have had with her for the duration of the time that you were together. And this might be a hard one for you to be breaking, but it's definitely going to be a hard one for her if she's used to this control. She demands to know exactly what the kids ate for lunch at your house. She calls local dispatch if you're 30, just a little bit late for a transition, even if she knows that you're in traffic or you've notified her about it. And what this is about is demonstrating to the court that she is using the children as a tool to maintain power over you. And so, like I just said, if this has been like you've been the one that's just been real passive in this stuff for the duration of the relationship, and then also in the time that you were parenting with her, this is going to be a hard one for you to break, but you've got to document it, and you've got to be very clear about what is happening, and that she no longer has the ability to have a say into what is happening during your parenting time and during the time in which you're interacting with your kids and you're building that new lifestyle, creating that environment, all of that stuff. So you need to just be very, very clear on your boundaries around that, and then document this controlling behavior. Now, the fifth one is the tactical strike. You've heard the podcast about the silver bullets. These are the silver bullets that are aimed at your reputation and literally just trying to take you out immediately. It could be a false allegation, even if you are the best dad, because the courts, again, are working on efficiency and risk mitigation. So you're guilty until proven innocent. These silver bullets are meant to really do something right off the bat. And it could also be emails to the gal complaining that you're asking questions at daycare, or you're showing up at extracurricular activities. It could be a false allegation of neglect. There's strategic moves, like I said, to take you out. Also, there's strategic moves to make you look like that you're unfit. And so by
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, dads, Jude here. I'm pausing this conversation for a mission-critical warning. Everything we discuss on this podcast only works if you have a role to return to. Most fathers don't lose their kids in court. They lose ground quietly through drift and decisions made under pressure. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Stop the drift today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the free weekend visitor risk assessment or book your fatherhood protection session. Your kids are counting on you. Now, back to the show.
Documenting these, you're not just defending yourself. So I want you to keep the mindset of, yeah, you are documenting it so you can defend yourself, but what you're doing is over a period of time. Again, in this chart, if you have enough tactical strike behavioral instances, you're exposing what she's doing. So if you've got something real, if you've just got this in there, you've got it documented, you've got the accusation documented, the situation of what happens, etc., then you're going to show. And then when it comes out that these are really just either nothing or false accusations, then over a period of time, they're going to see, oh, well, that was tactical. Well, that was tactical. Well, that was tactical. And then you've exposed the narrative that she's trying to create. So Very, very important. Okay, final category, and this is the most important category for you and your narrative, and that is flexibility. This is where you're documenting your own fitness. This is your high road leadership, if you will. Every time you are flexible, every time you accommodate her being late without getting into it, starting a fight, doing anything, you document it because, hey, like that's what you're going to do. You're not looking to be in a fight all the time about everything. Every time you agree to a schedule change because it's better for the kids, you document it. You document every time that you're doing something outside of what is the norm, outside of what is the agreement, or outside of what has been ordered, that shows the judge that you are the stable anchor. It proves that you are the parent who supports the child's bond with the other parent, which is one of the most significant factors a judge weighs in a custody decision. Absolutely, positively critical, because in this chart, then you've got all 6 of these different categories. Let's say you're just using these 6, and all of those other 5, you've got documented patterns of what she's doing, and then you've got your documented pattern of exactly what is the opposite, which is your flexibility, you're being reasonable, and putting the best interest of the kiddos first. It draws a stark contrast when somebody can look at that and go, oh, okay. And now we're gonna talk about how you anchor all that and how it absolutely sinks in with this protocol, and you the mechanics of how you actually do this. And one of them is consistency. You have to be consistent with this. And so what I want you to do in implementing this is to commit to the 21-day habit, right? They say it takes 21 days to create a habit, 90 days to create a lifestyle change. So you're going to create this 21-day habit. You have to update this chart every single evening during your shallow work block. And I talk with guys all the time. Yes, guys, this is going to be a lot of work. And this is going to be basically your second job for the duration of your divorce. But here, that's only 12 or 15 months for what is going to be the next, some of you, 2 decades if you have younger children. So so I want you to reframe this in your mind, that you're slowly building the foundation for your life for the next 20 years. So if you've got to take a couple of hours, 1 or 2 hours every single evening to do work on this for the next 12 months, that is, I promise you, it is well worth the next 2 decades of your life if you've built that foundation and you make sure that you get all this documented so you protect your parental authority. So you don't wait until the end of the week. You got to document this. You got to work on this documentation every single evening, because what's going to happen is if you wait until the end of the week, you're going to lose the vivid details that make make this evidence stick, that are the most important points of this. You'll forget the exact time she hung up on the phone. You'll forget the witness who was there when she took off with them from the recital or whatever without letting them talk to you. You're gonna forget all of these minor details. So every entry, and then every entry has to have an evidence reference. And so this is the biggest part of the anchor. Document, and I want you to listen to this next phrase that I'm going to tell you guys, because you need to memorize it really. Documentation without evidence is just a story. I'll say that again. Documentation without evidence is just a story. So it's just hearsay. It's he said, she said. Without documentation, just talked to a guy today who had he articulated very well all of these categories we were talking about. And I asked him clearly, like what I said in the beginning today, which was, do you have evidence? Do you have documentation of any of this? And the answer was no. So basically, this is just a story. Obviously, I believe him. I mean, but a judge, third party, a gal, and it is not going to. So documentation without evidence is just a story. Now, the second part of that I want you to memorize is documentation with a reference is a fact. Documentation with a reference is a fact. So this goes from a story that you're just telling to an actual fact. So the whole thing together is documentation without evidence is just a story. Documentation with a reference is a fact. If you log a gatekeeping event, you must link it to a specific message in the parenting app, whatever you're using, or a text screenshot. Hopefully you're off the texting or the phone and onto a parenting app that is keeping documentation, all this. But if you need a text screenshot or a video log or video recording or audio recording, you have to log it specifically to that. So to help you understand this, I want you to imagine again, planning for the worst. What is the outcome that you're potentially planning for? And that's being in a trial or a hearing with your attorney. So imagine your attorney in a hearing and the opposing counsel gets up, says that never happened, right? And your attorney doesn't have to argue. It doesn't become a he said and she said. They just simply look at your chart. They see your reference code. They've submitted it already for evidence and pull out the evidence referencing whatever, May 8th, 2026 video file. If necessary, they play the video. If not, they might rescind their opposition to their argument, and boom, it's all over, right? Because you've had it there. That's how you win. You make it so easy for your legal team to find the source of every entry that they can discredit her narrative in a matter of seconds. And if it gets in at worst, a matter of minutes, because they can pull it up, play the video, and then bam. I've seen this. Actually, I've had this happen, fortunately, but I've also seen this happen lots of times. And it is a beautiful thing because you don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to get emotional. You just sit there and you just watch her narrative just go down in flames. So, but it takes all that preparation up front, guys. I promise you, preparation, at the very least, it will maybe keep them from attempting to the narrative if you get to trial or you have to have a hearing about it. All right. So let's talk about the anchoring evidence and what you do with that in your what I call a digital sanctuary. So the chart is the chart that you're creating with those categories and the instances and everything and what happened is only as strong as the evidence folder that I just described behind it. So you need to create a digital sanctuary. It's something like a Dropbox, a Google Drive, or an app like Day One. This is where your master files live. You need to have a labeling system, a strict naming convention, not just saved as like video one, audio one, or whatever you're describing. It needs to have a date, the category, the evidence code, and then maybe if you want to have a brief description of what it is, you can do that too. But you need to be able to reference it directly to that chart. So, and what this is going to do, dads, is this is going to help you bridge that lawyer gap you've heard me talk about. Your attorney is a very important part of your team, but you're coaching this team. So think of it as this is your playbook. Okay, your coaching team, you got the playbook. In that playbook, it's showing the plays, right? If any of you have played any sports, you will have many really good coaches will have the plays drawn out for you, and you can look at those. You can look at those plays and know what everybody's supposed to be doing. Same thing for your attorney. This chart with the anchor to the evidence in your digital sanctuary, this is your playbook, right? And so your attorney is a tactical executor. They might be the quarterback, somebody that's very important, but they are only managing the law. That is their specialty. But you are the one that's the commander of this. You're the coach of that team. You're the one providing the high level intelligence. So if you give them and this is what guys do all of the time, and it just absolutely kills them on many fronts, but it kills them. They'll give their attorney a disorganized mess of 500 screenshots, and then what you're doing is, one, you're counting on the attorney to figure out the narrative for you, when your attorney is only thinking about this when they're billing you. And again, they've got maybe 50 or 60 other clients, and it's really hard for them to think proactively. And that's why they mostly are reactive to everything that's going on. The second part of that is it's going to cost you $10,000 just to sort through that and look at that stuff and come to figure out what some narrative is. Now, some attorneys are good at that, but it's still going to cost you. But I would say the majority of them are not really good at that. So if you give them all this evidence and you just continue to tell them, and I did this for a long time too, until I figured out and understood that, oh, wait, they're not going to, if they're good, they're going to do that. But even if they do that, it's not going to be to the extent that I know and understand all the details, which circumstances and which examples were the best and most egregious, or are going to be the most applicable in court. When I did finally start to figure that out is when things started to change. Well, and frankly, my attorney's bills went way down as well. And that's the thing. Like, if guys, I'll tell you, if you're hesitant about getting the coaching, just this point here is going to save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in implementing this. And I tell guys all the time, they're like, yeah, well, I don't have enough money. I'm like, trust me, you're going to save at least 10 times the amount of money in just attorney's fees. We're not even going to talk about if you get shafted, if you get a bad financial outcome, if you don't refinance your property the correct way. Like, those are other ancillary tens or hundreds of $1,000s that you can lose. My coaching fee, or any divorce coaching fees, is going to save you at least 5-10 times the amount of what you're paying them in attorney's fees and other fees. So just this alone, creating this narrative building chart with linked files, it's going to build a winning strategy for you for a fraction of the cost. All right, we're getting close to wrapping it up. The last part on this section I want to emphasize with you is what I call the 3 copy rule. So just digital stuff disappears sometimes, guys. So your phones break, text messages get lost, accounts get hacked. Like, man, I hear that all the time. That's why you need to get a separate drive, Google Drive, Microsoft, whatever it might be, Dropbox, where you keep this, that is, that only you have the passcode to. But you need to keep, and what you need to do is you need to keep your digital master in your sanctuary, in whatever this is. And you need to have also a backup on an external drive, so that if the Dropbox, if the Google, whatever gets hacked and gets wiped, or you forget the password or whatever happens, you have this backed up on an external drive. And if you want to go one step further, you don't have to do this. It's a little bit old school. I'm a little bit old school, but keep physical printed copy of your highest. Now, not everything, because if you're in high conflict, like, I think like my legal at the court is like over 500 pages. So that's like a stack up above my monitor here. But if you want to keep a physical printed copy of your highest impact evidence in a trial binder, that would be really good too, so that you just have that. And I recommend, when we talk about getting ready for trial, that you do have your own trial binder with you, with your attorney as well. So that would be helpful as well, so that you have some of this stuff. Because, man, I just tell you, I've seen and heard stories where the attorneys just show up and then they can't find the stuff, and you have it, like it just totally saves your ass. So treat this information with the same security you would treat classified intelligence, because it is that critical for you at this time. All right. Let's recap one thing I talked about last week. And if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. Actually, it wasn't last week. It was 2 weeks ago. Anyway, we're going to talk about mindset. We've talked about the mindset, the categories, and the protocol, but I want to give you this warning before we close. This process, and I alluded to it earlier, is exhausting. And so you do not want to give away any of your emotional energy to anybody, particularly somebody that might know really well how to suck that out of you, right? So staying flat and clinical when someone is lying or deceiving or making false allegations or whatever about you requires a massive psychological energy. So just remember what we talked about the gray rock method. High conflict personalities, they thrive on your reaction. They want you to get upset. They want to be living in your head rent free. They want you to scream. They want you to defend yourself. They want to bait you into a character attack so they can document you. And your greatest defense is to become as boring as that gray rock. Your defense or your response to her baiting, whether it's a text or in person or whatever, is okay. That's it. I know. Something like that. Your response to her, to her late arrival, to the accusation, to whatever, is just silence. And then a clinical, tactical entry into your chart with the documentation anchoring it. That's it. Don't get into it. Let the data do the talking. You're no longer hoping the judge sees the truth. You're building a record of stability that is so dense and so objective that the court's default assumptions that we talked about before also become impossible to maintain. You're demonstrating that you are the protective guide your kids need. You're showing the court that while she's focused on the conflict, you're focused on the children. All right, dads, this was a briefing. This was a heads up about one thing, and that's moving you from a victim of the system, which you can be and you easily will be if you let yourself, to the coach of your case, the commander of your case, whatever, the leader of your case, whatever you want to call it. And, if you're not prepared, I see great fathers all the time getting processed into being a weekend visitor. But after today, you are no longer unprepared. This is probably the single most impactful system that I've got in the Bulletproof Dad 90-day protocol that we have here at the Divorced Advocate that can assist you through this process. So now you have a blueprint, you have the categories, you have the protocol. This week, your mission is to start that narrative building chart. Even if there's no conflict today, you're going to just document the win, document that you pick up the kids on time, document that you helped with the homework, whatever it is. Build that narrative of the stable anchor. And as always, you hear me say it mid-roll, you hear me say it at the end, go and take that weekend visitor risk assessment. It is created just for these circumstances in high conflict. Identify where your lack of documentation has left you exposed. If you're feeling pressure and you want to talk about something sooner than that, just book a consultation. Go to thedivorcedadvocate.com. There is a button to either take the assessment or book a consult. Let's sit down, look at your timeline, triage this, and put your next steps together. So just remember that decision gap I talk about is closing every single hour. So if you're contemplating it, thinking about it, don't wait. Don't wait till after maybe mediation. Don't wait to kind of see if things stay amicable. Don't wait for the final trial to find your footing. Establish the facts on the ground today, because your children are counting on you. They don't need somebody that's a nice guy that's just trying to get through this as amicable as possible. They need you to lead them through this, and they need you to be a part of their life for the next 2 decades and beyond. Gentlemen, I hope that you found some value in this today. Thank you so much for listening. Please share far and wide on social media. Leave us a star rating. Leave us a comment. Again, that helps other dads to find this podcast and share it with others so that we can get this important message out to more and more dads. Thank you. Have a terrific week, and God bless.
This concludes today's briefing. Remember, in the family court system, intelligence without execution is liability. Ground is lost quietly during the decision gap between your court hearings. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Secure your role today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the weekend visitor risk assessment to identify your exposure, or book your private fatherhood protection system. Stay strong. Your kids are counting on you.